Hi, my name is Oscar Walker, and I'm here to talk about magnitude blindness and finding value beyond the numbers. And I think I can best demonstrate that if you'd indulge me in a little bit of an anecdote. You see, I'm unfortunately a little bit of a gamer in my spare time, so I'd like you to meet my friend, Simon. Simon and I go way back to about a month ago when we met for the first time at the end of Expedition 33. And Simon and I fought for about a week until I eventually came out on top. And when I did, my highest damage value was 15 million. I ask you, what does that mean, 15 million? Probably not a lot, because we've got nothing to compare it to. So let's compare it to something. My next attempt, 30 million. Again, it doesn't really mean anything, because we've got no point of reference to really have to give it any value. So I won't bore you with my next attempt, 70, 270, 330 million, because we keep coming back to the question, what do these numbers mean? So let's give them meaning. Simon can withstand about 50 million damage. Suddenly, 15 million doesn't sound like that much. 30 million, it's quite respectable, and 330 million is quite overkill. And I think that this principle can also be applied to material wealth. So what is wealth? Well, I asked the Oxford Dictionary, and they told me that wealth is a measurement of how much money or land a person or country owns. But as we've just seen, that's just a number, and we've got no concrete point to compare it to. So it doesn't really mean a lot. The Oxford Dictionary also said, however, that wealth is a large amount of something. It's a bit better, it doesn't rely on a numerical value. And so, for the sake of this presentation, let's take that something that you need a large amount of to be happiness. So, is money wealth? Yes, for all intents and purposes, money is wealth, as most people would see it. However, money has not much of an effect on your actual happiness. From the Nature Journal, they found that in the United States, income over $90,000 US has no net effect on your average happiness. It doesn't matter if you're earning 90,000, 900,000, even $9 billion US, it doesn't make a difference. And beyond 60,000 US, it already experiences diminishing returns. It already makes you not as happy as it would have. Furthermore, having a lot of money can actually make you sadder. In another study from the 1970s, lottery winners were compared to a control group and people who had been paralyzed after a tragic accident. And they found that the baseline happiness for each group was about the same after only about 2 years after the major life event. And not only that, but the lottery winners actually saw the smallest increases in happiness through smaller life events. So while their average happiness was the same, they actually experienced less joy on a day-to-day basis because they had such a high of winning millions of dollars to compare it to. And on a larger scale, we can look at the GDP. GDP is the gross domestic product. It's the measurement of how productive a society is as a number, but the GDP can be misleading, because GDP doesn't take into account many different factors, such as debt and poverty. For example, we'll look at the United States again. The United States has the highest GDP in the world, but its national debt is also significantly larger than its GDP. And what this means is that they'd have to pay back their GDP for over a full year in order to pay back all of their debt. Now, they can't do that because they need to invest into public services. But to try and pay off some of this debt and to try and make their country richer, to try and chase the bigger numbers, they've actually begun cutting benefit programs, which has a noticeable negative effect on many people within the country who rely on food stamps and other benefits. So, what are the alternatives to looking at money? Well, for that, we need to return to the idea of the hedonic treadmill, the idea that I mentioned earlier of a baseline average happiness. You can imagine this as being in free fall. As you fall, you'll reach a constant terminal velocity, but you can change your position to move faster or slower. As you lay flatter, you're going to fall slower, and as you turn to be more vertical, you're going to fall a bit quicker. And so the idea with the hedonic treadmill is not getting away from an average speed or an average happiness. It's instead making that average as high as possible. And the way to do this is, I've cut that slide, sorry. The way to do this is through being creative, I've found. Now, creativity, it's a little bit of a selfish thing, really. You make something for yourself to find a feeling of self-satisfaction within you. But I think that's the whole point. Psychologist Daniel Goleman has said that it makes you happier to understand yourself more through being creative. And this is backed up by neuroscience as well. The process of neuroplasticity is the process in which the brain builds new neural pathways in order to facilitate new information. This is the process by which the brain recovers from traumatic injuries, and it's also the process by which the brain learns new skills. So, when you're more creative, your brain builds new neural pathways in order to sustain this creativity. This, in turn, makes you happier because you're creating more for yourself, and it creates a self-serving positive feedback loop. And I can attest to this personally. On the screen here, you can see a poem I wrote. I'm not particularly proud of it. It's the first one that was on my Google Drive. But I felt better for writing it anyway. I felt better just having put that piece of me out there. I didn't intend to share it, and then it was the first one I could find. So here we are. And the larger pictures you can see are scenes from a video game I've been developing in my spare time, which I've really enjoyed doing, and I can genuinely say I feel really satisfied when I see how far I've come in that creative journey. And what about on a larger scale then? Well, we're going to look at alternatives to GDP, and for that, I think we need to look at the country of Iceland, because Iceland has 40 different measurements of national well-being, only one of which being their GDP. Most of Iceland's measurements of well-being are actually focused on quality of life, quality of housing, how many people re-offend after committing crimes, and Iceland, focusing on improving immaterial values, is actually consistently rated among the top 3 happiest countries in the world. It's also rated consistently the safest country to live in the world. And it's no coincidence that Iceland has one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world by focusing on keeping its people happy rather than keeping its people with lots of money in their hands. So to conclude, do the numbers really matter? The answer is it depends. If your income is really low and you're living paycheck to paycheck, the numbers really do matter to you. But as the numbers get bigger, as we return to the idea of magnitude blindness, they stop meaning something because they simply get too large. And the way around that is by looking for something that you can't attach a numerical value to, looking at becoming more creative, looking at becoming happier. So I return to my anecdote from the beginning. What do I remember from my time with Expedition 33? I don't remember the, frankly, embarrassing amount of hours I spent just trying to make my one damage number against Simon slightly larger. But what I do remember is the multiple hours I spent before that engaging in the very real story, which has changed me as a person and has fueled my creative endeavors to come. Thank you for listening.